So in the last class, we have studied we have started studying the labor market discrimination, and there are two kinds of discrimination we're going to talk about. One is called the taste discrimination, and the other is statistical discrimination. And then in last class, we discussed the taste discrimination by employers. Okay. So the basic idea is that the employers, for example, don't like women, so so hiring women incurs disutility to these discriminatory employers, and depending on the degree of discrimination coefficient, depending on the size of the discrimination coefficient, the employers will hire no women, or they will hire fewer women than the optimal level. Okay? So at the end, all these discriminatory employers will suffer profit loss. Okay? So they will get lower profit than the maximum level they can get. So at the end, the implication is that discrimination does not pay. Okay? So male firms and female firms, we talked about it. So profits of discriminatory firms are lower than profit of non-discriminatory firms, simply because that they act in a way that they act a non-optimal way to satisfy the employer's taste for discrimination. Okay, that's the basic conclusion. So to fight against the discrimination in the labor market, government regulation or enforcement is probably needed. But also, it's also that the conclusion is that the competition also can be a quite important tool to fight against discrimination. Okay, so competition in the market, because that at the end, the discriminatory firms will have lower profit, and at the end, they cannot win the competition. Okay? So that's the basic idea. Obviously, the competitive market is quite important. For example, if the market is monopoly, the monopolists have the excess profit. Okay? So even though they sacrifice some profit of them, they still can operate quite normally, because there is no competition. So monopoly market structure, okay, can actually perpetuate the discriminatory practices in the labor market. So more competition is actually a good thing to limit the discrimination in the labor market. So that was the very powerful insight from Gary Becker, who developed this theory for the first time. Okay. Now, how about the labor market equilibrium? Actually, we talked about the individual firms' decisions. And then if we extend our discussion to whole labor market, actually we can draw this type of diagram. Okay, so let's think about it. So in the vertical axis is the female-male wage ratio. Okay, so 1 means female-male wages are the same. Okay, so remember that men and women in this particular model, they are perfect substitutes. Okay, their productivity exactly the same. Okay, so female-male wage ratio, if you think of, is 1 means they are exactly equal, over 1 means that females are paid more than males. Okay, less than 1, females are paid less than males. Okay. Now in this particular diagram, what we assume here is let's assume all the employers are discriminating against women. So all the employers are discriminatory in terms of their taste discrimination. Okay? But their degree of discrimination is different. Some firms are more discriminatory than other employers. Okay? So we can say the discrimination coefficient, small or large. Okay. So in this particular situation, since no firm is since all firms are discriminating against women, if the female-male wage ratio is, let's say, exactly equal to 1, then no female will be employed, right? Because if they are equal to 1 and employers are discriminating against women, then no employer will hire women. But as the female wage ratio goes lower than 1, let me turn on the aircon. If the female-male wage ratio goes below 1, so female gets cheaper and cheaper, right? So depending on the degree of discrimination, and now the firms start hiring women. Okay? So at first, firms that have low discrimination coefficient will start hiring women. Okay? And then female-male wage ratio gets down even further, then more discriminatory firms will start hiring women. Okay? So if females are very, very cheap compared to men, then even very strongly discriminatory firms will hire women, okay, because it's so cheap. Okay. So that's how the demand curve is derived. Okay. And then if we assume that supply curve is vertical, okay, means that there is a fixed number of women willing to work at any wage, so we draw this supply curve. Well, we can draw a supply curve like upward sloping. Actually, it doesn't matter in terms of market equilibrium, female-male wage ratio. So as you can see, this is the market equilibrium, female-male wage ratio. Okay. And as you can see that given this demand curve, okay, assuming that all firms are discriminatory against women, then equilibrium female-male wage ratio is less than 1. So at the equilibrium, females are paid less than men. Okay. So that's the situation we are talking about. So in a way that, we have seen the statistics last time that if we look across the countries, the female-male wage ratio, then no country has more than 1. Actually, every country has less than 1. Female-male wage ratio. Okay, I'm not saying that the discrimination can explain the phenomenon, but discrimination is one way of explaining that observation. Okay, it's not the only observation, only explanation, but that's one explanation. The discrimination can explain why it's less than 1. Okay, in a society. But actually, we can, depending on how the employers' tastes are, composed of, we can actually think of another situation. For example, like we can think of a situation where that some employers are discriminating against men, not women. Okay, so which means that even though the female-male wage ratio is greater than 1. Okay, so it means that females are actually more expensive than men, but some firms are willing to hire women. Basically, it should mean that these firms are discriminating against men, right? So if that's the situation, so we have small number of firms that are discriminating against men, okay? And then most of the firms are discriminating against women. But if the supply of women to this particular market is very small, okay, then equilibrium wage ratio is possibly greater than 1. Okay? So depending on how the demand curve looks like and depending on where supply curve is located, we can find different combinations. Okay? Well, obviously in this case where every firm is discriminating against women, okay, the equilibrium wage ratio cannot possibly greater than 1. Okay. So that's what we talked about. So if there are a small number of firms that prefer female to male workers, and okay. So in a way that, if you look at this labor market and let's say female-male wage ratio is greater than 1, okay, then we cannot say that every firm is discriminating against men, okay, because it's quite possible that although the most firms are discriminating against men, okay, against women, we can still have this, okay. Also, by the same logic, even if we see the female-male wage ratio less than 1, it does not necessarily mean that every firm is discriminating against women. Okay? It is quite possible that depending on where the supply curve is, right, we can draw a different diagram, right? So, for example, like, if lots of firms are actually discriminating against men, we can have like, this type of situation, right? It's quite possible. So, looking at whether female-male wage ratio is greater than 1 or not, does not exactly tell you that whether every firm is discriminating against men or against women. Okay, so that's the what we are going to say. Okay. So anyway, what we can show here is that if there is a prevalent discrimination against women in the labor market, okay, at the equilibrium, female-male wage ratio is likely to be less than 1. Okay, so so far we have talked about employer discrimination, but employer is not the only party that can discriminate against a certain group. One possible discriminatory group is employees. Okay, so employee discrimination. So some people don't like certain characteristics of their co-workers. Okay, it's quite it's quite well-known thing that employee discrimination does exist. So how do we think about it? Actually, we can use a very similar framework as the employer discrimination. Okay, let's suppose that male workers are prejudiced against working with female workers. Okay, so they simply don't like working with women. So if working with women incurs this utility to those males. So in this case, male workers act as if they receive WM times 1 minus D, even though they get actually WM. Okay, so D is discrimination coefficient. So which means, for example, D is, let's say, 0.1. Let's say even though the male workers gets, let's say, $10 per hour, if they work with women, they feel like they are getting only $9 per hour. Okay, they actually get 10, but they just feel like, psychologically, they feel like they are getting $9. Okay, so if they work with men only, 10 is 10 for them. But if they work with women, 10 is not 10, it's like $9. They act as if they are getting only $9 if they work with women. Okay, so D is the discrimination coefficient. As you can see, that if D gets bigger and bigger, then these male workers get more and more discriminatory. So if D is, let's say, 0.2, then they will act like they are getting only $8. Okay, ready? So it's very simple, very similar framework as the employer's discrimination. So what happens? Actually, it is quite, simple, in the sense that male workers don't like working with women. Okay, and from employer's point of view, okay, which means that if a firm wants to, let's say we assume that employers are not discriminatory. Okay, so employers are completely neutral. So if a firm wants to hire both male and female workers, which means that to keep the male workers working with females, they should pay actually extra to men. Okay? So let's say men and women are equally productive. They are perfect substitutes. So from firm's point of view, there is no reason to pay different wages. Okay? Let's say, both are, let's say, worth $10 per hour. So if the employees are not discriminatory, they would pay $10 per hour to men or women. Okay? But let's say if the men are discriminatory against women, then what they have to do is if they really want to keep men working with women, then if they pay only $10, then these men are not going to work. So they have to pay extra, let's say, $10, $11, $12, okay, to keep them. Now, it's funny because from the employer's point of view, if the employer is not discriminatory, okay, and females and male workers are perfect substitutes, then obviously that male, the employer has no incentive to hire both male and females, right? Now, you think of three cases. If WF is less than WM, let's say females are cheaper than men, obviously no employer will hire men because men are simply too expensive compared to women. So no male workers will be hired. So there will be no problem whatsoever because no men are working, so there is no reason to get angry. Okay. If WF is greater than WM, then anyway, no female workers will be hired, so who cares? Only men are working, so they are happy. Okay? So we don't have to worry about them. But at the equilibrium, because they are perfect substitutes, actually WF should be greater than equal to WM. Okay? What happens if any one group is paid less than the other group? At the end, the other group's wage should fall. Okay? Because no man. So for example, in this case, since no man is higher, so male wage will decrease, and at the end, that should be equal. Okay? And then what employer would do? They will just segregate men and women. Okay? Because there is no reason to hire both. Okay? So if you happen to have females, then you just keep hiring females. If you happen to have males, then you just keep hiring males. Okay? Then you don't have to pay anything extra to the men. Okay? So in this case, what does it mean? It means there should be no wage differential between men and women at the equilibrium if only employees are discriminatory. Okay? Got it? So simple logic. So you will see lots of segregated workplaces, but no wage differential. Okay? If you apply this to racial discrimination, it's basically the same idea. If the employees are discriminatory, let's say white employees are discriminatory against black employees, then you will see at the end some firms hire only whites, some firms hire only blacks. They don't just mix together. Why? If they don't want to mix them, okay, then the employer should be willing to pay the extra to, let's say, white employees. But obviously, the employer is not likely to do that because they are perfect substitutes. Okay? So that's the basic conclusion that there is a segregation but no wage differential. Okay? So in this case, as you can see, that these segregated workplaces can be a result of taste discrimination in terms of from employee side. Actually, employer discrimination also can create segregated workplaces, right? So actually, both types of discrimination can create segregated workplaces, but employer discrimination makes wage differential, the female wage lower than male wage, and employee discrimination does not make wage differential. However, there is an exception. Why? Actually, think about it. Actually, if you start from the blank, okay, then you can hire only males and you can hire only females, and then you just don't pay anything extra to the man. But let's say you start with male workers. Okay, so you want to hire more men, but it is quite possible that you cannot hire men. Let's say, there are shortage of men, okay, for the jobs that you are going to fill. So what is possible is that you have to actually hire women. Okay, so you can reach that kind of point. You have to hire women. Okay? Women are available. They are skilled. Okay, and then there are not many men that can fill up your places. So you have to hire women. So what you should do? What you should do is that one way of doing it is that you probably have to segregate them. Okay, and pay the same wage. But it is quite possible that segregation probably cannot be done. Let's say the job itself requires integration of working, so they have to interact with each other. So there is a segregation. Just simply, it's too costly. Okay? Then what you should do? What you should do is that you have to mix them. Okay, and then what? You have to pay extra to men. Okay, because your male workers, telling you that if you don't pay us extra, we are going to leave your company. So you have to keep them, but you cannot hire only men, so you have to hire women. You cannot segregate them because it's too costly. So it's just cheaper to pay extra to the men. Okay? So in that situation, okay, you can have actually wage differential. Okay? So in this particular case, the employer is just paying the premium to male workers to work with women. Okay. Questions? So as I said, that the basic idea is that there should be no wage differential, but actually in these certain cases, okay, you see the wage differentials between men and women. Now, the third type of discrimination comes from the customer. Okay. So customer discrimination, it's probably rare nowadays, but in 1970s or 80s, like male customers often did not like to deal with female employees. Okay, and the race situation is actually more probably visible. Like white customers don't like work, interact with black employees, that kind of thing. So customer discrimination. Okay. Now think of customers who are prejudiced against women. Okay. So what do they do? Think of for example, car dealership. So if you go to, if you imagine a customer going to buy a car. Okay. And there is a male salesman, there is a female salesman. Okay, female salesman, salesperson. So male salesperson, female salesperson. Nowadays you have to be careful, in choosing your vocabulary when you use English. Actually, sales, not the salesman, salesperson. Okay. And actually, I know in some cases it's quite important. Actually, for example, let's say later that you get a job and then you go to a business meeting. Okay. And if you're in some people are very sensitive about the language you choose. Whether you refer a salesperson and salesman, then that can give very bad impression to, let's say, female executive at the meeting. So you should be careful. So I should be careful. Salesperson. Okay. So think of a sales. So this customer meets a salesperson. One male and one female. Let's assume this customer is prejudiced against women. So this customer does not like, interacting with female salesperson. Okay. So how should they do it? Okay. So this used the basically same framework as employer or employee discrimination. This customer will behave as if the full price of a good or services is P times 1 plus D if it is provided by a woman. Okay. So let's say if the female salesperson suggests that no, you have to pay. How much is the car? Assume luxury car, $100,000. Okay, let's say $100,000. But if D is, let's say, 0.1, then this customer will feel like, is probably he's paying 100,000, not 100,000. It's like 110,000. Okay, so $10,000 extra. Okay. But if the salesperson is a male, then he will feel like he's paying $100,000. Okay, so basically we have the same framework. So what does it mean? It means that if the male salesperson and female salesperson meets this customer, then female salesperson will have very difficult time in selling the car to this customer, right? So if lots of customers are discriminating against women, which means that female employees will have very low performance, right? Because female employees are likely, have to, because they will bring lower revenue, because if they are trying to sell the car for the same price, they can sell it only to the customers who are not discriminatory. Okay? And if they are going to sell the car to a discriminatory customer, they have to give discount. Right? Because if they are selling the car for the same price as male salesperson, she will not sell any car, or she will sell only to non-discriminatory customers. So obviously from employer's point of view, these female employees are doing worse than male employees. Okay? Because their performance will show up. Okay? Because they're going to either by selling fewer goods for the same price or selling the same goods for lower price. Okay? Either way, it's not a good thing for the boss. Okay? So since female workers are less productive, obviously, even if the employer is not discriminatory, okay, the females will be paid less because they are less productive. Okay, so that makes sense, right? So as you can see that now that even though the employer is not discriminatory, you can see that female-male wage ratio is less than 1. Okay, so if customer is discriminating against women, then we can see the female-male wage ratio is less than 1. Because the employer cannot pay the same wage to the male and females because their productivity is different. So we start with the assumption that they are perfect substitutes, but at the end, because of customer discrimination, they are not perfect substitutes. Okay, male are actually more productive than females. So that results in wage differential. So having wage differential only does not necessarily mean that employers are discriminatory. Okay? So when you think of like a labor market discrimination, the first thing that comes to our mind is the employer discrimination, but actually it can be much more complex. Now, what happens? What would be the result of customer discrimination? One thing is that wage differential, because their productivity is different. Okay, this is one possible reason. Another one possible result. The other result can be a segregation. Wow. No, actually, it's like not in all jobs, women are discriminated against. It is possible in some occupations, okay, customers are more discriminatory. Some occupations they are not. For example, I'm not sure, but let's say that if lots of people have the idea that men are more knowledgeable than women about cars, then probably car sales business, customers are, some customers are discriminating against women. But let's say in fashion business, I don't know, I'm just making up example. It's a fashion business, let's say. Let's say, there is no such idea that men are better than women or women are better than men. Well, it's possible that they have an idea that probably women are more knowledgeable about fashion than men. Okay? Then what would happen? Okay? It is quite possible that if you're an employer, let's say you hire a salesperson. Let's say you have a car dealership, and then you have, let's say, fashion boutique. Okay? You hire a man. Then you know this man will perform much better in car dealership, not in fashion boutique. So you send your male employees to car dealerships. Okay, you hire females, then you know that these female employees will perform much better in fashion boutiques than in car dealerships. So you send your female employees to fashion boutiques. Okay, so you go to a car dealership, you see only male salesperson. You go to a fashion boutique, you see only female salesperson. Okay, so there are segregated occupations. They just do different things. Right? So they just assign the individuals to different jobs, catering to the customer's taste. Not only the bosses will do it. Actually, if individuals know this type of discrimination exists, for let's say in car dealership business, then it is quite likely that the women are less willing to enter this car dealership business in the first place anyway. Okay, that I will be discriminated against, I will perform worse. Okay, what's the point of going to car dealership? So a lot of women actually are not just trying to get into that business. They just probably go to some other business. There is no such discrimination. Okay? So there is quite a selection into different occupations from the females side. Also, men can do it, right? Also, let's say the men are, discriminated against in certain industries or in certain occupations. They are not gonna get into that type of business in the first place. Okay, so that's quite possible. For example, it's a curious thing. So, in olden days, most of nurses were females. Actually, still it's true. No? Let's say it is known that the male nurses are discriminated against in hospitals. Okay, I'm not sure it's true, but it can be possible. So then, no man is willing to do that kind of. They don't want to enter this nursing in the first place. So in this case, I just show the selection by the employers, but actually there is it is quite likely there will be a selection by the individuals, by the workers in the first place. Okay. So we can have occupational segregation as well. So as you can see, that taste discrimination usually leads to wage differential, either wage differential or segregation in jobs, or both. Okay. So usually that's the result of taste discrimination. Okay, so we saw that taste discrimination itself can create, all these things in the labor market. So in the more discriminated societies, you will see that lower wages compared to male wages, or lots of segregation in workplaces. Now, let's talk about the second type of discrimination, which is called the statistical discrimination. Okay, statistical discrimination is different from taste discrimination in the sense that in the statistical discrimination, there is no disutility. Okay? So statistical discrimination, in a way, results from the individual's optimizing behavior due to related with the information asymmetry. So think about it. Actually, statistical discrimination happens all the time. For example, something like this. Think of an employer. Okay, so employer, let me give you an example. Let's say employer is trying to send send one of the employees to like a training program, let's say, long, costly training program. Okay, that can increase an employee's productivity to let's say, substantial degree. Okay, but it costs a lot. Okay, for example. Now, the employer should choose who should go to that training program. Okay, then what should they look for? Okay, they should look for how smart they are, all those things. But also quite important to employer is that how long this employee will stay with this company. Okay, because the idea is that, okay, we send this employee to this training program, this person gets very productive, then we can recoup the benefit, okay, and the cost of this training program from this person. Okay, the longer the better, obviously. If this guy or this lady leaves this company after just a year, okay, it's just a waste of money and time. So you want to pick a person who's very loyal and who's willing to work for this company for a long, long time. Okay. The problem here is that the employer actually does not know who's going to stay with this company for a long time, obviously. You ask your employees, every employee will say, oh, yeah, I will stay with this company until I retire. If they know that this training program is a big deal, okay, they can, it can increase their productivity substantially. Who doesn't want it, okay? So everyone will say, I will stay with this company with long, long time. So obviously you cannot, ask them. So you have to have some ideas that how they are going to behave. So they will look at records and everything. But at the end, you probably don't know perfectly. Okay? Now what you should do? Actually, one thing that seems very reasonable is to use a group characteristic, okay, assigned to individuals. For example, let's say, females are on average, from your experience or from statistics, on average, it's a fact actually, females are on average more likely to retire from workforce than males, early, let's say. Lots of females quit their job, let's say, when they get a first child or when they have family. So at the end, let's say you have one candidate, male candidate, one female candidate. You don't know who's going to stay with this for a longer time, but statistically, females are more likely to quit than males. Then what you should do? Okay, lots of people will pick a man and send the man to the training program because it looks safe, right? It seems reasonable. If you ask anybody, a lot of people say, that's a reasonable thing to do. At the end, they look exactly the same, so it's safer to send some male than females. Okay? So what happens? What happens is that this perception of average gender differences, right? So they don't know the individuals. Just what they look at, what they use, these perceived gender differences, average characteristics, not the individual's characteristics, can result in gender differences in pay, hiring, or promotion. Okay, so this man goes to training program, female don't. Okay, man gets promoted because he becomes more productive. He gets higher pay. Okay. So the promotion and pay will be different at the end. Okay? Or they are less likely to hire females in the first place. Okay? So that kind of practices, that kind of prejudices, can result in all these type of differences. Okay? So statistical discrimination has nothing to do with utility. Okay? So for this employer, the employer does not incur any disutility of hiring hiring females or from giving the females training opportunities. What they care about is their future profit, and then from that kind of point of view, with the lack of information, it seems to be a reasonable choice to use the average characteristics. Okay. And actually, in everyday lives, we don't do it all the time. You meet a person, you meet a stranger for the first time. You actually don't know much about him or her. But let's say you see that this person, let's say comes from a certain region of this country. Then you have certain perception about their average characteristics. So then, some people just assume that this person would be like those. Okay, you see, that kind of that kind of statistical. We just call it statistical discrimination. So just people do it actually quite often, unconsciously. So these kind of practices happen. One bad thing about statistical discrimination is its feedback effect. So this feedback effect is quite reasonable, but it's in a way it's a reinforcement mechanism of statistical discrimination. What happens? Let's continue this training program example. Let's say this boss interviews this male employee and female employee, and at the end, he sends the male employee to training program. So this lady didn't get any opportunity to get the training. Okay, but let's assume that actually this man was not planning to stay with this company for a long time. Okay, he was going to quit. After a year, he was actually calling his friends about the job opportunities elsewhere. And then this lady was very committed to this job. So she was actually planning, the whole career with this company. So she was very hopeful, But at the end, what happened? She didn't get the opportunity. Then obviously my colleague, this male colleague who's not very good, and then he was calling all over his friends about the new job opportunities. He suddenly got this fantastic training opportunity. She didn't. What happens? She will probably be very disappointed, right? And what happens? Then she will have jobs that are not very good, So she doesn't have proper training. So she probably do things that are not, very hopeful for future promotions. So she will quit, right? So it seems to be a logical choice for her. So she needs to, look at another opportunity in other companies. Then what happens? The employer looks at it and, wow, that's just what I predicted, right? So the employer, without knowing that, she was planning a whole career with this company when he was about to leave, but at the end, what he finds out, then he got the training opportunity and he just got promoted, so he stayed with this company for a long time, and she quit. And because of the boss's choice, this thing happens. But in that way, this type of feedback, this type of response from the female employees and male employees basically reinforces, okay, the employer's perception of male-female differences. Okay? So next time, when the same thing happens, and he will be more confident in giving this training opportunity to a male employee, not a female employee. Because he has seen that, wow, these female employees are really, people that we cannot trust. So, at the end, this type of practices will just start, and then there is another feedback effect, right? So this type of practice just reinforce each other. So statistical discrimination will just continue, right? So this reinforces the employer's belief, and this type of feedback effect can be a strong, very strong reinforcement mechanism of statistical discrimination. Okay. So this feedback effect, basically, even if the employer's belief were wrong initially, So actually, no, he was wrong. Actually, he should have picked the lady. Okay? And he would see a much better result, for example. But anyway, the feedback effect at the end reinforces such belief, right? So at the end, but what actually happened was just like what the boss predicted. So the feedback effect reinforces such belief in the long run, and statistical discrimination persists even in the face of competition. Okay? So at the end, actually, working this way does not harm their profit much. Okay? So that's how the statistical discrimination starts. So this statistical discrimination is different from taste discrimination, right? Because in statistical discrimination sense, the employer or employee or customer do not have any problem in dealing with men or women. Their utility. There is no so taste discrimination is basically about this utility. Okay, you just don't like working with this group of people. So that's what usually people think as discrimination. Okay, but statistical discrimination has no such thing. But the end results are basically look pretty much the same as taste discrimination, right? So with only statistical discrimination, you can still at the end, women are paid less than men. Okay, they are less likely to be hired. Okay, they are less likely to be promoted. Right? So the results look the same. The reasons are different. Okay, but end results look the same. So in a way, it's very difficult to. But we can actually sometimes you can see the taste discrimination if they do act really in an obvious way. But sometimes it's difficult to distinguish whether it's a taste discrimination or whether it's statistical discrimination. And as I said, that the statistical discrimination happens not only in the labor market. Actually, statistical discrimination is the essential part of business in insurance market, right? So insurance market whole business is built upon statistical discrimination. For example, like if there is any student who drives, okay, let's say you buy a car, then you have to buy an insurance, a car insurance. Now, how do they price the insurance? It's all statistical discrimination. Okay? Especially if you have any prior record. Let's say you have never driven a car. You have never owned a car. This is your first car. So you go to buy the insurance. So this insurance company has no record of your accidents or anything. How do they price you? Basically what they do is that they just assign group characteristics to the insurance buyer. If you're young, under age 25, let's say, you're single, you're a man, okay, you are dangerous, okay, likely to be reckless. Why? Because when they look at their record, accident record, these group of people have the highest accident rate, okay? So even if you are, let's say, the world's most careful driver, okay, but they don't know whether you are the world's most careful driver, then you should pay no insurance, okay? You probably will never into accident in your whole life, but they don't know. What they know is that, okay, you are a single, young, and man, okay, you pay this. Okay? And if I try to buy an insurance, okay, I'm older, okay, and married with a kid, okay. But actually, I have a slightly bad record, but anyway, driving record. But if they say my driving record is clean, then what? They will give me substantial discount, okay? Even if, okay, I'm prone to car accidents actually, so it's not bad. It's not good for me. Okay, so one time my car insurance application was rejected, but anyway, I'm not a careless driver. I'm just unlucky. Anyway, If they don't know this kind of thing, what would they look at is they know I'm just older, married with a kid, and my occupation seems to be quite safe, so they will give me a substantial discount, right? So what do? They are just doing statistical discrimination. It's their whole business, right? So insurance market is, and also in many other markets as well. Okay, so that's what the statistical discrimination is. Very, very common phenomenon that we can see in the economy. So far we have looked at the theory of discrimination. One is taste, the other one is statistical discrimination. Then we say that their results are in general that differences in pays and differences in their occupations, occupational segregations, right? And probably in differences in promotions or hiring practices. Okay, but at the end, their sources are different. Discrimination sources of discrimination is different. One is taste. The other one is just information asymmetry, or information asymmetry. Okay, but their results look the same. Okay. Now the last thing I want to talk about is the discrimination. How to measure the discrimination? Okay, now let's think about female-male wage differential. Let's say. In Korea's case, it's like 65%, less than 63% or something. So 65%, for example. So female wages on average, okay, 65% of male average wage. Okay. Is it discrimination or is it something else? Okay. Is the discrimination that we should worry about? If it's a discrimination that we should worry about, let's say, then probably we have to do something about it. Let's say probably we have to, have very strong, enforcement of anti-discrimination law. Probably we have to do something about it, these discriminatory practices. Or if it's something else, then we should do something else. Okay? So it is quite important to measure discrimination. Okay? What's the source of this wage differential? Okay? Usually we look at the wage differential. And this has been quite actually, in Korea's case, this has been quite a sensitive, quite an important topic, this female-male wage differential. Okay, because female-male wage differential in Korea it seems to be very large compared to most of industrialized countries. 65% is very, very low number. Okay. So how to measure it? Okay. One thing that we should know is first, a simple difference in the average wage, that's what we have just talked about, 65%, is not likely to be the measure of discrimination. Okay, some people say that, it's 35%, that's discrimination, but that's not true. Why? It is quite possible that they may differ in their average skills. For example, let's say, most of men are, let's say, a lot more men are college educated than women. Okay? So on average, the women's human capital level is low. Men's human capital level is higher. Okay? Then if the market pays by human capital, then we can expect that male wage on average should be higher than female wage. Not because of gender differences, but because of their human capital differences on average. Okay? So we cannot say that that's discrimination. It's just how the market works. Okay? So market rewards the, let's say, the skill level, human capital. Okay? So even if there is no discrimination, the average wage may not be the same because of difference in the average skill. So even if there is no discriminatory practice in the labor market, only because their average skills are different, we may have different wages. Okay. So that is the task here is when you look at the wage differential, we should differentiate discrimination from human capital differences. Okay. So how should we do it? Okay. So we should measure whether and how differently men and women of the same skill are treated. Okay. So assume that they have the same skills, then we just look at it, how differently they are treated. So even if they have the same skill, female workers are paid less than male workers, then we can say that there is discrimination. Okay, so what should we do it? Okay, how to measure it? Actually, one popular way of doing it is called Oaxaca decomposition. Oaxaca is a name. Oaxaca is a labor economist in Arizona. And he wrote a paper about this Oaxaca decomposition in 1970s, I think. Anyway, he became famous for this method of this decomposition. Okay, this decomposition actually can be a little more complex than what I explain here, but I'll just give you a very simplified version of Oaxaca decomposition. Anyway, even the more complex method is just based on the same idea. Just how it's different how they decompose it. Okay. Okay, the idea comes like this. To make things really simple, let's say I think of a group's average wage, male average wage or female average wage. Okay. So its basic idea is the intercept plus the price for the group's skill times the average skill of the group. Okay. So it's like this. Average wage. Okay. No, you can think of actually each person's wage. Okay. Each person's wage is, you can think of alpha times beta times skill level of, as I say, if you have, let's say, person 1, then you can say like this. It's basically it's a function of a skill level. So first person's wage is just alpha plus beta times the first person's skill level. Okay, so like linear. You can think of it as this wage equation. So the wage equation looks like skill level. So something like this, alpha. Okay. So the slope is beta. Okay. So if the skill level is low, then this person will get this wage. If skill level is higher, person will get higher wage. Okay. So first person 1 has this, person 2 has S2. Let's say the last person, let's say person N has. Okay. And actually, you average them out. Every person's wage, what you should get is that the average wage, let's say W bar, is alpha plus beta times what? Average skill. Okay? So that's the basic idea. So let's say wage is determined according to this formula. Okay? It's a linear equation. And in actual studies, they do not use just a very simple linear equation, but it can be a little more complex. But the basic idea is this. Okay? Now, let's think of this. You can think that actually these alpha and beta are different from group to group. Okay? So male average wage is just alpha m plus beta m times S bar. So for males, their alpha m and beta m are different. And females, we use F. Same form of function, but coefficient is different. Okay? Alpha F plus beta F. Okay. See. Now, if men and women are treated identical, we should mean that alpha M, alpha F, beta M, beta F should be the same, right? Okay. So if alpha M is different from alpha F, beta M is different from beta F, which means that men and women are treated differently, even with the same skill level. Okay. So to capture that difference, we should do this type of decomposition. How you should do it? Okay, we just think of Wm bar minus Wf bar. Okay, which is alpha m minus alpha f plus beta m sm bar minus beta f times sf bar. Okay? And then we can actually, what can we do is to take the difference, okay, and then take the difference what we do, we plus beta m sf bar, okay, minus beta m sf bar. We just add and subtract the same number, so this should not change anything, okay? But what it gives us is that this is a situation where that women of average skill is treated as if she is a man, right? Okay, and minus beta MSF bar. So then we can get this decomposition. Okay, so then we just beta M SM bar minus we get SF bar, right? So this minus SF bar comes from this, okay? And then we just bind together the other terms, alpha m minus alpha f bar, alpha f plus beta m minus beta f SF bar. Okay. Okay, get it? Okay. Just to add and subtract, okay? And then we just rearrange them, then we can have this. And then you can see that beta m SF bar will be cancelled out, okay? If we now look at this. First part, this is the part that captures average skill difference, okay? So this part shows that if men and women are treated as if they are both men, okay? Then this one gives the wage differential by average skill difference. Okay. And the other part, the rest, is obviously shows the difference in the alpha and difference in beta. Okay. Get it? Obviously, the alpha m and alpha f are equal, beta m and beta f are equal, and this whole thing should be equal to 0, then we should have only this. Okay? So this last term, second term, is the difference in the price for the same skill. Okay? So if average women have the skill of SF bar, okay, and this captures the price, the difference in wages, difference in the price, how they are treated, the difference in how they are treated. This is the measure of discrimination by the Oaxaca decomposition. Okay? Get it? So it makes sense? So this is a very simple idea. There are similar decomposition strategies, but the simplest one is to do this. Okay, so basically, this is how we think about it. Okay? I'm not gonna go into detail. If you understand this equation, then it's generally that it should be the case. Okay. So in this particular example, there is a WM bar and there is a WF bar. So that is the observed wage difference. Okay? And if the women's skill level is SF bar, average skill level. If the woman is treated as if man, then she would get WF star. So WM bar minus WF star is due to what difference? It's due to skill difference. And WF star to WF bar is the discrimination, measure of discrimination. Okay. So if this part is larger and larger, okay, in the whole difference, then we say more due to discrimination. Just look at what is the proportion of this part and that part. Okay, I did a thing using 2012, and I just did this OAKA decomposition, actually using a little more complex model than in this case we have only one variable, but if we add more variables it gets a little more complicated, but the idea is pretty much the same. So what I did is, this is not a very thoroughly done study, it's just the example that I show you. Okay, this is not the real research. I just did it for only for example for this teaching. So man average hourly wage is 65,001, and women is 43,001, and wage difference is like 22,001. So here it's like about 2/3, right? So that's about the national average. So women's average wage is only about 2/3 of men's average wage. So that's about the national average. And 22, and we did that, and difference in skill part explains 54% of the difference. And price difference, the so-called discrimination, 46%. Okay? So like half and half. In this example, a little less than half is due to discrimination. Okay? So this type of decomposition actually has been done in many studies. Okay, so it seems like this is a pretty good idea of capturing discrimination, but there are limitations. So you should know the limitations. This type of studies actually quite common, but there are limitations. One thing is that how do you define this skill level? Okay, so if you have more data on the skill levels, that's useful. Okay? For example, you may have like their education, their training record, their seniority on the job, all those things, okay, that you can see in the data. But there are unobservable differences. Okay, their ability may be different, their effort level may be different, their motivation may be different. All these things will affect their wages. Even though, from statistics, let's say if I do study the data, I wouldn't see any of this. Okay, but this should be actually included inside S. Okay, but we cannot see. Okay. For example, if on average, let's say the women's effort level is lower than men, then this wage differential may be partly due to difference in effort level, but we never see it. So that's the thing. So it is not possible to have perfect data on S. Okay, that's the limitation. Okay. Depending on what kind of variables you use, you will get different numbers, different result. Okay. Another thing is actually a deeper question. We just said that if their average skills different, okay, SM and SF are different, we said that this is not discrimination. But actually, if you talk to, let's say, sociologists, they would beg to differ. Why? Let's say, why the women in the first place have lower skills than men? Okay? Isn't it because of discrimination in the first place? It is quite possible that they were discriminated against in schools, in the education system. Actually, this has been suggested, for example, in racial relations in for example, United States. Okay, the black students are often discriminated against in schools, their curriculum, okay, is more suitable, designed more suitable to, let's say, for white kids. Okay? So white kids can relate much better to what they learn than black kids because there are cultural differences. And then there has been some reports about, how our Korean textbooks treat men and women differently, right? So that kind of things can affect, in the first place, their skill level. Okay? How they are treated while they were young. So we assume that, before they enter the labor market, in this case, it seems like we are assuming that before they enter the labor market, we have no discrimination. Okay? And discrimination happens only in the labor market. But in reality, it may not be true. Discrimination actually happens way before they enter the labor market. So it's a more deeper question. Even if I say that half is due to, a little more than half is due to difference in skills, then some sociologists will say that that's also because of discrimination. Okay, we never know, but at the end. So the Oaxaca decomposition is a very it's a very useful tool to find out the measure of discrimination, but it's not the perfect tool. It's quite debatable whether it actually captures discrimination. Okay, so I think that's it for today, and next week we will start our discussion on labor unions.